Hello again, it's been a while. First, an apology, because I'm very grateful to anyone who watches this channel, and especially anyone who puts up a comment, even if it is "dude, you suck," or whatever. But I've neglected this for about a month because I was involved in doing something else, and that's come to an end. So I'll be back donating a lot of, or diverting a lot of my own energies to doing this again, because it is something that I really love doing, you know, whether anybody watches it or not. I like doing it. So what I thought I would do next is a series of videos on two of my favourite albums. Now, I have touched on these albums before, and they are this, which is in my top 10 favourite albums of all time, Lou Reed's Rock and Roll, and this, Lou Reed Live, which is also in my top 10 favourite albums of all time, along with Gary Moore, Mick Taylor, Nils Lofgren. No, all my favourites. And I have done a few videos before on tracks from that. I think I've done Intro Sweet Jane, which is still going to be the most popular. I did Heroin, I think I did Rock and Roll, and that may be it. So what I'm planning to do is go through both albums. Now, a while back, somebody, I was just saying that I really appreciate the comments, you know, maybe apart from "Dude, you suck." A while back, I put a comment up, and he said something like, you know, I like the guitar playing, but just too much blah blah. So this video is just blah blah, you know. So if you want to like fast forward to when, you know, we start in earnest on this, then that's fine. But I think a little background is probably pertinent to the whole thing, right? Lou Reed. Everybody knows who Lou Reed was, right? And Lou Reed was in a band called Velvet Underground. Famously, Brian Eno once said, only 1,000 people bought their first album, but every single one of them formed a band, which I think is a very prescient comment. Now, probably what he meant by that was that album is so accessible that, you know, when you're first starting to play the guitar, if you had an album like that, you could probably think, well, if I could learn a couple of chords, you know, I could make up words and sing it over it, you know. They then did White Light, White Heat, Loaded. I think Loaded is one with the banana, which he revisited obviously on Transformer. Velvet Underground with Nico. You know, quite a few, and they are the precursors of what I think we would call the New York new wave art house scene, you know, which is basically like Television, Talking Heads, Pat Smith, and all that sort of stuff. There's not a great deal of focus on wild, squealing guitar solos and big drums and, you know, rock and roll. It's very different, and, you know, I remember as a kid when I was about 15, one of my friends had this album. It's the Velvet Underground Live at Max's. By this time, Lou Reed had left the band, so Lou Reed's not even on that one. And I can remember we would listen to it, and my friend Gary and I would say, I think we could just play that. I think we could just play that songs, because they're very basic, they're pretty lo-fi. Lou Reed then did his first solo album. By this time, it had clashed head on with David Bowie and T-Rex Mania in the UK. And David Bowie would continually say, I love Lou Reed. And Iggy Pop, so, you know, people would be, who is this Lou Reed? You know, so people go back the way, look for who the Velvet Underground are, etc. So it was the right time for Lou to bring out his first solo album. And there's that very famous picture of the Hammersmith, the very last show, with Mick Ronson and Spider from Mars video and Trevor Bolder. And if you go and see the Bowie film, you know, Jeff Beck came on and played with him. And at the after show party, there's this famous picture of David Bowie sitting with Lou Reed and Iggy Pop. You could see which way he was going, you know. He obviously wanted to be at the centre of what was happening, and it was the end of the Spiders from Mars, More's the Pity. But it was a new chapter for Bowie. Lou Reed then brought out his first solo album, which is the one that looks like it's got a little, I don't know what you call an orc or something. It's like a little goblin looking into this jewel, you know, in like an urban decay landscape. And then, of course, he brought out Transformer. Transformer, in the UK anyway, had this massive hit with Walk on the Wild Side, where everyone had to decipher what these lyrics meant and who the people who were part of the Andy Warhol circus were. Little Joe was Joe D'Alessandro, Candy was Candy Darling, and the song really took hold. Herbie Flowers played that double track, amazing bass line. And there's a little anecdote. One of my friends was in New York in a rehearsal room, and he saw Lou Reed walk past in the corridor, you know. So with a little bit of front, he decided he'd just play that line, which, you know, I'm sure he was very, very good at. And he said a somewhat disgruntled Lou glared back into the room, you know, like, why are you playing my song? Anyway, Transformer, big hit, Lou's massive name, David Bowie's going stratospheric. It's all good. And at this point, someone must have had the idea of Lou doing a live album. Right? By the way, if I get any of these facts wrong, by all means tell me. I've done this plenty of times, and as I keep on saying, this is how we learn. The album was produced by a guy called Steve Katz. It's fantastic production, which has become a little bit controversial because of something on this album that I'll get to in a minute. So, 1973, Lou Reed plays the Academy of Music. He doesn't have his backing band who are called the Tots anymore. He has assembled a band of absolute superstar players, quite a few of which form the core of Alice Cooper's Welcome to My Nightmare, now, especially the guitar team of Steve Hunter and Dick Wagner. I mean, I think quite often the nerd in all of us says, what's the best twin lead guitar pairing of all time? Now, it could be Brian Robertson and Scott Gorham, it could be Duane Allman and Dickie Betts, it could be Eric Clapton and Duane Allman, it could be Gary Moore and Scott Gorham, it could be any of the Lizzie pairings. You know, there's a number of things. It could be Keith Richards and Mick Taylor. For me, Steve Hunter and Dick Wagner are right at the very top. There is no best, as we know, but Steve Hunter and Dick Wagner are right at the very top. And if you want to hear what they did, the ability that they displayed, that's your album. Go out and get it today. It's a masterpiece. Well, 73, what's that, 50 years on. Absolute masterpiece, right? And what happened here is very strange. Prakash John, a guy called Whitey Glan, Ray Colcord, and the two guitar team of Steve Hunter and Dick Wagner. And what they do in this album is they take Lou Reed classic songs that were done with the Velvets, and they do them in a hard rock setting, if you like. And it didn't go down well with some hardcore Lou fans who preferred, you know, the lo-fi, quite druggy approach to these songs. But there was a massive crossover, because I think the album came out, you know, maybe it'll appeal to, you know, mainstream audience, all the Lou fans will buy it. Some of them didn't like it, but it started to get picked on by the rock brigade. So people who maybe were buying Montrose or Derringer or UFO or Thin Lizzy albums, and this is how I heard it in 1975, I think it was. It was 2 years after the show. And one of my friends said to me, have you heard this? And I knew who the guys were. I knew they played in Alice Cooper's band. And Welcome to My Nightmare was out at this time. And you know, when I heard it, when I heard the twin lead and stuff on this, it was just like, man, this is unbelievable. So, you know, the set list, it starts with a thing called Intro Sweet Jane. If you get any bunch of guitar players or guitar fans of a certain vintage having a beer or something, What's the greatest moment? What's the greatest guitar moment ever? You know, is it Stairway? Is it Voodoo Child? Is it the twin lead solo in Hotel California? Someone will say Intro to Sweet Jane. I can guarantee you, within 5 minutes. So it's got this intro that Steve Hunter wrote that he'd actually done, you know, with a different band. Then goes into Sweet Jane, which was a Velvet song that Mott the Hoople did a great cover of, or version of. Now it should then go down a gear for Heroin, and then How Do You Think It Feels and Caroline Says were not on the original album. So you've got this reissue with 2 extra tracks, which is like, you know, manna from heaven to the fanatic, you know, like myself. When I saw this in the shops, and I picked it up, although I probably had 2 copies of it already on vinyl and CD, and I flipped it over and I found there were 2 extra tracks. It was like, you know, yahoo. They then do White Light, White Heat with Steve Hunter and slide, sort of ballad Lady Day, and it finishes with rock and roll. Now what happened then was the album sold really well. So despite some hardcore Lou fans not being wild about it, the album is selling really well to rock fans, to some Lou fans, to Bowie fans who, you know, who are buying Lou and Iggy stuff because of the association with Bowie. And the word began to spread among people, guitar fans, that, you know, this is as good as it gets. You've got to hear these 2. So incredibly, I can't think of another example where this has happened. I told you this would be a lot of blah blah. We'll get to all the guitar in the next few videos. Incredibly, what they did was they found the tracks that weren't used on Rock and Roll Animal, and they brought out this and called it Lou Reed Live, because, you know, obviously there's an audience for Lou and these Velvet songs played by a crack band. So, like, you know, we picked, well, it would be 5 songs because they're all quite long, to go on Rock and Roll Animal. Obviously they didn't put on How Do You Think It Feels and Caroline Says, and then the decision must be, well, what's left? What didn't get on the album, right? So check this. This is the album that could be called Leftovers. Now, it's very hard to know which is the better album. I wouldn't like to have that well, I would like to have that conversation, but I wouldn't come up with a definitive answer. These are the Leftovers. Vicious, with a pair of them spitting guitar lines right, left and centre. Satellite of Love, kind of dominated by Steve, some incredible playing. Walking the Wild Side, the big hit. I'm Waiting for the Man. Those 2 have got less guitar, they've got less guitar soloing. And then, oh my goodness, Oh Jim, which then goes into Sad Song, and that's the end. So we've now got an expanded Rock and Roll Animal and Lou Reed Live. But like a lot of live albums, UFO Strangers in the Night being a good example, the order of play is not what they played on the night. Now, I now know through one of my friends, because I have 2 friends that I talked to online about these 2 albums who I think are obsessed with them in the same sort of ballpark way that I am. I now know the running order that happened on the night. And in the next video, because I know this is quite a lot to take in, you may not be interested in the slightest, but I feel it's important to get the background, because I'm going to go through both albums and do videos on every single song. So, you know, if you watch these and you've got a guitar in your hand and you want to learn the songs, that's great. And at the end, you know, you'll be able to play every lick, every chord, every solo on these 2 albums. So in the next album, I'm going to talk about 2 things. One's the equipment, you know, and I'll reference a famous quote, a Marshall and a Junior. I've got to get that signed. Now it's said by Dan Baird of the Georgia Satellites. Go through the running order, and I'll talk about, you know, is it important to use, you know, equipment that is pertinent to the songs, you know, and I'm sure I'll end up saying, as I always do, what you play is 100 times more important than what you play on. So, see you in the next video, and we'll be getting close to starting, but sadly there'll still be a bit of blah blah. See you in a minute.